All right, you want to fight crime? Let's get dangerous.
And hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of From the Desmos Ball Press Publisher. I'm your host, Joe D. McPhee here. And tonight's pretty much is going to be kind of like a free-for-all. There's going to be some ranting, some books, and hopefully some great conversations between you and myself here. So let's go ahead and sit back and relax and get started here. We do have to deal with the business end of things here by telling you guys that Stupid O'Clock happens 1 hour into the show here. That gets followed up by Last Man Standing at about 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then that gives you a little bit of a respite until Monday morning, until you have Nevermind the Furthermore with Nicholas Tucker at 10 a.m. Eastern. And let's not forget about Comic Book Spectrum that happens Thursday, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, right here on this channel. So without further ado, we're going to do one of the very few, probably last, I wouldn't say last, but probably one of the few remaining live new comic book pickups for the week here. Why? Because we got a box about, well, I would say about a priority box full of comics here that we're going to go through real quick here. So this is the type of stuff that came through this week here. So we ended up getting Uncanny X-Men #1. This is Winter's End miniseries here. So we got the first issue of that as a whole here. And then we got, I want to say that for a little bit later. I didn't put that with the rest of the other X-Men here, but we're going to skip a little bit here. We got some more Missing Mr. Miracles from Volume 1 here. We got issue 21 from the layover here where it went to 35 cents here, and another copy of 21. So 20 and 21 here, which means that I'm back down to missing only 2 from the tail end of the original Jack Kirby series. Then we got Venom #1 for the Madness story arc. So that's came in today here. We got issue 10 and 11 of Black Canary. So issue 10 and 11 here. And then we got the first 4 issues of the Black Bolt run here. So there's issue #1 and all this bagged together. So there's really 4 issues altogether, the first 4 issues of the Black Bolt series. Then we got Black Panther #8. And we got some old school Spidey Super Stories here, and we're filling that collection out pretty nicely here. We got issue #6, as well as a issue #10, which is pretty cool. And then, believe it or not, we got a full run of it now. We got the Smurfs. Yes, issue 1, issue 2, and issue 3. All 3 are first print Smurfs, the full entire run. It's only 3 issues long for the original Smurf series. And then we got a very special block here And when I say it's a block of comics here of Doom Patrol from issue 41 to issue 50. So that's 41 through 50 in that little pack there. That's nothing new or different. You know, I already had all of Doom Patrol Volume 2 here. So those were extras that I bought just to be on the safe side here. Yeah, okay, we're good. So now we got New Mutants 76. So we're getting that completed here. We got another copy. Another copy of Red Sonja #1. And I believe all the rest of these I already showed you guys once before. It looks like, or did I get some of this stuff mixed up? Yeah, some of this stuff got mixed up. That's what it is. Yeah, some of this stuff got mixed up. Or no, I didn't. No, I didn't. No, I did not show you this because I would have remembered if I would have showed you that. That was the missing piece. I finally got a full run of the first volume of Dazzler with this missing piece here. The one missing piece that everybody's trying to overcharge other people for because it's an homage to Michael Jackson's Thriller. I finally got one. I need to get a couple more, but you know, it is what it is here. But I finally got one. Then we got X-Force. This is what makes me think that I showed you guys this before, but there's X-Force #1, second print. That's the gold cover. Second print is always the gold cover. First print is still very well able to get. I don't remember if I showed you the Inhumans #1, the Uncanny Inhumans #1. I got one of those now. Free Comic Book Day X-Men 1. And now the rest of this is volume 4 of X-Men since I'm trying to complete that particular run of X-Men. So that's the reason why I kind of slowed down here because I want all the X-Men together. So we got another copy of issue 1 from that volume. And there's issue 3, issue 4, issue 5, issue 6, issue 9, issue 10, 11, 12, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 21. So that covered most of that volume right there. Then we got Spider-Woman 16. This is another one that I'm missing. I believe this is from volume 5 or 6. I believe it's volume 5. A copy of, I think this is, this is the soul, whatchamacallit, the guy who wrote 8 Billion Genies. This was his story arc of Astonishing X-Men. That's Astonishing X-Men #1. And then we got another copy of Dazzler 10. Then we got another Absolute Wonder Woman #3. Another copy of Astonishing X-Men #7 I think it was like, this is, I know it's Josh Whedon, but I'm trying to think. This is second print, but I can't remember which volume. I believe it's volume 2 of Astonishing X-Men. And then here's another variant of Astonishing X-Men #8. A copy of Catwoman #1, the Darwin Cook version of Catwoman 1. Another copy of the Dollar Comics version of Batman Adventures #12. Another special edition of X-Men. This is the reprinting of Giant Size X-Men 1. This is extra copies that I could sell later on if I need be, but there's another copy of She-Hulk #161. This is when the tail end of Hulk Volume 3 went back to legacy numbering. And I think this is part 1 of Jennifer Walters Must Die. And then we got She-Hulk number 38. I think this is from volume 2 of She-Hulk. Volume 2, She-Hulk, last issue of that here. And that brings us to the end of new comic book pickups for the week here. Like I said, it's just one of these priority boxes filled all the way to the brim. I didn't go to storage as of today, so that's pretty much why we're able to do it live. Normally, when I go to storage, we pre-record the books that goes into storage, and we put them in where they need to be placed, and go from there. Now, over the next couple of weeks, I don't know how much of the stuff would get here because I got stuff coming from all over the place here, but I don't think it's going to be a lot of those books are going to make it here before the Christmas rush and everything here. So that brings us to updates and accountability here. I have finished page 6 of Primetime Saturday Night number 6 here. We're going to start really getting more into it over this next couple of weeks here and really buckle down and everything to that magnitude. It's been quite hard because I made a lot of people promises as far as other things that need to get done here, as far as other ventures that I'm part of. But the major thing here is that we're going to try our best to get Primetime Saturday Night number 6 done. And we have the Legends of the Giants and Slayer number 1 ready to go. I just have to get it over to Elaine Haygood. And I already started the process of working that out and the payment process and all the other stuff to make certain that the book gets edited before we actually go to print. We got that. We got a couple other things to get in order. We still got to get the Amazonia number 8 done here. And I forgot what the other one was. The original series AWF would still have that on the back burner, but that probably be later in 2026 here. But by the end of the year, I really want to get this done. You know, at least Primetime Saturday Night number 6 done here. And I see that we're, kind of losing people and everything here. So I'm not going to harp about the production side of things here. And we're going to get into the topics and everything that we're going to talk about, because we got some rants, we got some conversations, we got questions. And nevertheless, it's that time once again here. So what we're going to do, because of the topics and everything, I'm going to talk about a couple of things here that we'll get into some of the rantingness that I'm going to have here. So the first thing that I'm going to bring up here is this. Now, I don't disagree with this stance at all. So that I want to say that I'm going to preface that first here. I don't disagree with the stance that is being made here, but I also want to point out a couple other things too. So one of the things that really chapped my hide over this week here, and this is a group that I'm part of on Facebook here, and it gets to the point where I now kind of want to question other artists and comic book artists as of right now here, dealing with this topic. So the admin of the group said, admin here, if you use AI for your comics in any capacity, even animating your stills, you will be banned, no exceptions. P.S. Enjoy this graphic, use it in your projects. End quote. And pretty much it's saying no AI in comics. And, you got people commenting about, oh, yeah, I'll never do this, or I'll never do that, I'll never do that, I never do blah, 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 blah. It struck a chord with me in a very negative way, because of a couple of things. And this is why I have to kind of preference what I'm about to get ready to say here is you have to be very specific, because the way I look at the AI problem as of right now is not the way that most other people will look at it. AI, as they fear as of right now. It's nothing more than a tool. It is not generating or creating books in the capacity that we, the artist and the writer or the creator, is creating these books. The tools that they got out there now are tools. The problem with those tools is that they use stolen references. So yeah, I would have a problem with people using stolen references. However, to say no AI, you should really expand that out. Expand it completely out. Because now I'm going to really come after it. Because who's to say that if I use one of these AI tools with my own resources, the stuff that I actually draw, the stuff that I actually work hard to actually sketch out and everything, put it in an AI tool and start, manipulating, generating stuff of my own artwork as a tool, which is no different than Photoshop. You want to say, oh, because I use that tool, my stuff is banned and I'm no longer welcome. But if I did pretty much the same stuff in Photoshop or Quark or any other graphic program, it's okay. That to me gets rather dicey because, again, the whole fear of AI as it is today is the use of stolen assets, not the fact that it's generating content. It's generating content off of stolen assets. There's no concept or design or anything from the individual that hand drew that, you either paid to hand draw it or you hand draw it yourself. That's the major thing here. So I get the whole copyright issue. I get the whole thing. And trust me, as a person who used DOS Studio to create things like Legends of the Giant Slayer and Primetime Saturday Night, I understand the computer aspect of things here. But yet you go to one of these AI tools and all of a sudden somebody cranks out a book using it. The first thing that I would question is, where did you get the art resources from? Nobody's saying prove where you got the art from in a statement like this. Nobody's coming back to say, oh, I had paid X, Y, and Z for this, and this. Copyright wise, it is okay. It doesn't matter what tool I use at that point. So when I see stuff like no AI, I applaud it, but also at the same time, I have to come back and ask, what part of this particular phenomenon are you against? That's the major thing here. If you're using it and you don't have any type of artwork that you have paid for, no concept sketches, nothing to that magnitude, and all of a sudden you pop up with a book, I got a problem. However, if you have a plethora of sketches and everything to that magnitude, and you fed it through an AI tool and you use it to do basic concept work and all this other stuff to build up that book, I don't have a problem with it because now you're using it as a tool. Big difference. It's no different than getting the scanner, doing the same type of manipulation in like a Photoshop or in any other graphic program at that point. But if you're stealing resources, like for example, I believe somebody was talking about cityscapes and everything to like that magnitude for like backgrounds and everything. Yeah, that's that's stealing resources because other people have either taken the photos and everything or drawn the backgrounds or drawing the cityscapes or drawing whatever countryside that you're using for that book. I get it. But if you're going to take a hard stance like this, you better be ready beyond a shadow of a doubt to have your ducks in a row to truly explain what you mean by no AI. This statement in this group does not satisfy that. I get what they're saying, but some people, you're going to have to spell it out, and then you're going to have arguments. You're going to have arguments to you blue in the face here. One of the things that I myself, and I see it all the time on DeviantArt, and one of the reasons why I haven't really posted hand-drawn stuff or the DAW Studio stuff anymore on DeviantArt, is because when they have the DreamUp, when they did the DreamUp AI, and they made it free to use for everybody, now we're seeing an uptick in people calling themselves AI artists. And it's like, to me, it's like, you can't be an AI artist. You're using other people's resources. You're not creating anything new. You're using a program to manipulate resources. Now, mind you, the resources that DeviantArt allows you to use is pretty much stuff that is in other people's stash categories on that platform. So, in other words, you're using other people's work that is being manipulated by a program to create images for that purpose. I have even shown people here on this program that program really doesn't handle perspective and scale very well. Matter of fact, a lot of the AI programs that are out there have a hard time handling perspective and scale. That's something that, again, most programmers who are not artists cannot, program for very well. It's not something that can be easily taught to a computer in that aspect. It takes years to master perspective. It's easy to give a computer the basics, but it takes years to master it. So again, the other thing, these programs are not absolute when using other people's resources. It cannot redraw hands correctly. It cannot redraw feet correctly. It cannot draw certain limbs correctly. So in a way, the artiste side of things here may be the simple fact that you're correcting what the actual AI program is generating here. You're correcting a hand, you're correcting an eye, you're correcting a foot, you're correcting errors that was in the actual final output and to make a final product. Is that really artistry? Probably not. But the thing about it is using other people's resources. Now, here's the rub with this. And when I say it's the rub, because people could look at technique as a whole here. Let's take light boxing for example. Who's to say that somebody could go out, grab a photograph of a building or a cityscape, put it on a light box, trace it, and then make whatever changes to it before they actually draw it out on a regular Bristol board and use it as an example. The technique is what pretty much AI is trying to do. The person is doing it by hand, but the AI is doing it as a tool. Now, the rub with this is you don't own that photograph. or at least you don't own the copyrights to that photograph. Isn't that the same thing that the AI tool is doing? They really don't have, full copyrights to that photograph that it's using for that background, but yet it's using it and doing what it needs to be done here. It's just something to think about when we have a no AI policy. Now, amongst artists, y'all could come to an agreement as far as what no AI is. But when I see blanket statements of that, and I actually went into the rules because they actually amended the rules for this about no AI images and stuff to that matter. They really don't spell out what is AI and what is not. And it's sad because a lot of times I look at rules that are being set and it's like, this is so much like an honor system. You got to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that this stuff is your images in some form or some fashion, that either you hired somebody to do it or you did it by hand or you did it in what is considered a non-program where you have to start from scratch. Like if building it from Blender, or building it from DAW Studio, or building it from Poser, or building it from any other platform from the ground up. It's gotten so bad that even anime studios are now asking applicants to literally show them photographs of them at the art table doing the work. That's how much fear is out there as far as being able to do the work. Now, one of the things that I have mentioned several times on this channel about the actual work itself here, and one of the things that I feel that a lot of comic book artists is missing out on, is the simple thing of this here. Now, I know I boxed mine back up here because I ran out of space here because I've worked from home. My normal 9 to 5 allow me to work from home, so I have another laptop sitting here in front of me, plus this one that's right there. But this is my pen tablet. This is my Huion pen tablet. The creation of that and going pure digital now forces artists to give up on possible revenues from going away from Bristol board. Everything could be done digitally. The penciling and the ink could all be done digitally now. And that kind of hurts the whole aspect and plays more into the favor of AI tools. I'm not saying everybody should go back to Bristol boarding here, but you might have to think a little bit more about why the old school Bristol boarding aspect is so prevalent. That used to be extra income for the artists, despite the fact that, back in the day, they used to have to mail the Bristol boards into the publisher. The publishers do the whole photograph method, shrink it down, do whatever manipulation that they need to do to get the books inked, colored, and out the door, from the printers and everything. However, after so long, the Bristol boards are mailed back to the artists. They could use it for their portfolios, and if worse comes to worse, they could sell the boards as art. That's something that rarely happens now because everything went digital. Now, if you try to do it now with digital, it would be considered a print. It would not be considered a original, which garners more money. The one of one garners more money in the long run as opposed to a print. And that's where the problem lies at with a lot of the stuff that's going on beyond the shadow of a doubt about people who may not have the talent using these tools to create these graphical images here. I mean, let's get everything out there. If you're going to take a standpoint of no AI, you're going to have to spell it out. You're going to have to spell out very, 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 very detailed, spelled out what is considered wrong and what is not allowed and what is going to be forbidden. That's all I got to say on that topic here. The other topic, and I'm going to bring this up on screen right now. Yes, our friend Swagglehorse did a nice little video. Now, am I angry at the video? No. Am I going to bring up a point that was not discussed properly? Yes. Now, if you haven't watched it, the video is called Collectors Get Big Mad Over Absolute Batman Sales. Why does vintage hate modern? Now, to give you a quick little synopsis here, and you can watch it at your leisure here. The video is talking about how there is more or less a divide between vintage collectors and modern collectors now. And one of the big controversies that's been happening is that a 9.8 Absolute Batman #1 is now going for $400. And people are just losing their minds over the fact that a book like that is already at $400, and was talking about the overinflation of modern books and all this other stuff, and that, you know, the book hasn't even been out at least 3 months as of yet, and it's just an absurd amount of price that the book is going for at a graded 9.8. Now, the way it was presented is in Swagglehorse, it's right in this. It's really apples and oranges when you look at older book versus those who are in the modern. And he was looking at how a lot of vintage collectors were hating on the modern books, having these inflated prices and everything to that magnitude. And I'm looking at this problem completely different, because it is really apples and oranges. You know, in a way that he presented, it really, instead of bringing people together, it caused more of a divide. And what I'm going to talk about as far as this video is concerned is not really the fact that it's a vintage versus modern. What I'm about to get ready to talk about is the point that was never brought up in this particular video. And I know if he would have brought this up, it would have made that his video go from like 13-14 minutes to about like an hour and a half. The thing, and I'm going to come back to this here. The problem with what was presented here is that when it comes to modern books, the demand is not necessarily indicative to the amount of copies that are out there. Plus, the outlier sales drives the fair market value up too early. Now, I want you to think about that for a second here. You know, he showed all the people who's talking about, oh, I wish the bubble would pop on this book and yada, yada, yada. And the book should never. It's like, no, that's not what you should. That should not what you should be worried about as of right now. What you should be worried about is, why are comic book sellers looking at these outlier sales to the degree that they are? Yeah, you're going to have people that are willing to pay $400 for that 9.8 CGC certified, you know, Absolute Batman #1. They have a right to do so. But not every 9.8 is going to reach that $400 mark. You're going to have those people who are just that fanatic about it that's going to do that. You're going to have other people that's probably going to pay no more than maybe $70 for it. However, because the book is so new in its lifespan, there are probably going to be more people paying closer to that $400 mark than taking the time to get just a raw copy, perusing it and sending it in and mitigating that cost of just, oh, here's $400. Give me the book right here and right now here. We got Liberty. Like, yeah, value in comics isn't logical. Age, rarity, print runs doesn't matter as much as popularity and demand at the moment. People buy what they want, not what should be valued at. And that's where I'm going with this here, especially in the modern age of comics. That is absolutely correct. There is too much manipulation, because back in the day, there was no real such things that often as far as a 1 in 10, 1 in 25, 1 in 50, 1 in 100, or one per store, or seller exclusives. Those were not really heard of back in the 80s, back in the 70s. It really wasn't heard of. And back then, it would have been considered a special printing. Would have been treated a little bit differently here. But in the modern age, popularity and if I could say it, I wouldn't say popularity, I wouldn't say demand, but the urgency of how quickly somebody is willing to pay 5 times, 10 times market value for something is very, very high. Again, I'm not faulting the popularity. I'm not faulting the popularity at all. However, if you got 10 outlier sales at $400 as opposed to 5 that's at 70, guess what fair market value is going to dictate? It's going to skew it more to $400 for that 9.8 instead of having a normalized value, because of the simple fact that until there is enough graded copies out there and enough sales data out there to really normalize where the value of that book is at, we don't know. We just don't know. So getting upset about $400 for a 9.8 Absolute Batman #1 is kind of noteworthy to be upset about that, because of the simple fact that there's that many outliers that are outliers. And when I say outliers, there's like, we got enough people out there that's willing to fork over $400 for that one book. Now, one of the things that came up on that video is people being lazy to actually hunt. And I thought about that. I was like, you know what? That's a good point. But here's the other problem about it. Even with hunting for the book, to get it closer to cover price, now you're thinking about raw books. Now you're taking the opinion of booksellers and other people as far as what is a 9.8 when it comes to that raw book. It's not like it's like, for example, for me to go online to Graham Cracker Comics and buying an Absolute Batman #1. I'm not seeing that copy that they're sending to me until after it gets here. So I'm rolling the dice on it. I'm rolling the dice on, hopefully they give me a good enough copy that is warranted for that 9.8. If you are a truly 9.8 hunter like that. If you're not physically going into the store and perusing and looking at the books itself, you're taking a gamble. You're rolling the dice and hoping. And I literally mean, you're really hoping that the copy that is being sent to you is a 9.8. There's enough people out there that's not willing to do that. And that's why I said that's a valid point. Maybe there's not enough people that are willing to be hunters in that aspect. And if they're not hunters, and you got something that has already been certified as a 9.8 or a 9.9 or a 10, they'll probably be willing to pay whatever it takes to get it. Now, you also have to be mindful of it as of right now. the book is rarely new. It's fairly new. Not all of the raw copies have been submitted into CGC as of yet. There's probably a whole bunch of them still sitting there, at CBCS, CGC, PSA. At insert any grading company here. There's got to be X number of books still sitting there, which means that the supply for possible 9/8 goes up. At this point in time, that sales data is too small to really be like, oh yeah, this book is actually valued $400. Like, no, it's not. Stop telling people that, because of the simple fact that you have enough outliers where that book lands right about that area. That's not all possible books to be sold here until we get enough sales data. And this is what I'm going to say about sales data. Having 10, 20, 30 sales is not big enough. And sometimes having even 1,000 sales is not a big enough sample, depending on the volume that has been printed. Absolute Batman #1, I believe, had at least 5 or 6 printings already. So that volume is vast. So for us to get a good picture of what that value of the book is going to be, we need at least maybe 20 to 30,000 sales to get a good picture. Now, what does that mean? Has there been 20 or 30,000 copies of Absolute Batman #1 been graded at a 9/8? And if so, now let's take a look at the normalization average for pricing across the board. Now, out of that 20,000, if all been 400, then I was like, you know what? I'll back off. Everything makes sense. But right now it doesn't, because it's not enough data out there. And I believe there's not enough books out there as of right now that has been graded by all the grading companies to suffice that this is a $400 book. Now, with that being said, I don't believe it's truly a vintage collector hating on that, Absolute Batman #1. There are some hard feelings, and granted, I'm tired of the splintering of collectors. I really do. I mean, it gets to the point where, as we move further in comic book collecting, this hobby gets more and more splintered. And when I say more and more splintered, it's like I mean more and more people who are like, I only focus in on Golden Age. I only focus in on Golden and Silver. I only go as far as Bronze Age. It's not enough people that's looking at the full gambit like myself, all the ages here. Now, mind you, I don't collect everything up under the sun. I'm going to be quite honest about that. I don't collect everything up under the sun. There's a lot of books that, and those who are normal frequent my channel know that it's like, oh, I'm about to go and buy ASM 300. I'll go, meh, okay. But if you told me that you're about to get ready to go and get an All Stars comic #8, and I was like, man, I envy you, because I wish I had the hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy one. There's a major difference here. I don't poo-poo the person who wants to have that ASM 300, because that's what they want. But to me, that's not on my upper echelon as of yet to stop and get here. I think the low man on the totem pole of, like, out of all the possible grails for my collection, I think the lowest one on the totem pole here would be probably Giant Size X-Men 1. And if I was able to get a Giant Size X-Men #1, that's still going to be a 5-digit figure that I have to shell out money for. That's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to do. But, if there's a will, there's a way. And, if we could get a hold of a raw copy as a lot lower price, so be it. But I do have all the different reprints of it, so it's not like I'm missing out on the story, but it would just be like one of those things to be nice to have here. And besides, I'd rather take that money for that Giant Science X-Men #1 and use that money to complete my Wonder Woman Volume 1 collection here. And like I said before, I got it down to, I think it's like 126 issues that I'm still missing here. So yeah, I'm in the lower 100s, starting from like the lower 100s back down to 1 in that collection here. So it's really one of those types of, choose your poison here. But me collecting more of the vintage type stuff does not make me hate what's happening with Absolute Batman. I encourage what's happening with Absolute Batman because the Batman fans finally got a book that they like, and I don't hear too many complaints about, oh, they got Bruce Wayne wrong about this or about that and blah, 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 blah. But what makes me upset about videos like what Swaggle did is that it doesn't really paint a thorough picture of the problem. It paints a picture of how the hobby is splintering. But if you're going to paint that picture, at least define the problem the way that it's supposed to be looked at. The problem with the modern comic side as of right now is that books fair market value goes up way too fast because of the lack of sales data. And then when it comes crashing back down, everybody wants to blame, oh, poor sales and this, that, and the other. It's like, no, we jumped the gun here. We're taking the outlier sales that are astronomical and thinking that is the absolute, the absolute de facto standard. And it is not. It's an outlier. And when any new series come out and people are paying $300, $400, $500 for a 9/8 graded copy out the gate within the first 5 or 6 months, it's mainly because of their own fandom. And we shouldn't knock their fandom. Now, to say that the value is $600 for every last one that's a 9/8, by no means. I'm sorry. I have a hard time believing that. And that's kind of like where, the whole thing about the splintering of the groups, about comparing apples to oranges, comparing modern books to older books or apples and oranges. I agree with that. Swaggle House was 100% right about that, because there is more marketable sales data with older books than it is with brand new books that are coming out the gate now. There's enough sales data that's there that we could get kind of like a good feel or a good value of where things should lie at. Do I agree that ASM 300 should be a couple of $1,000s? No. But there's at least enough sales data out there, even with the outliers where people are paying $3,000 and $4,000 or $5,000 for it, to kind of normalize it back to like a number that seems like it's reasonable. Do I agree? Do I agree that it is worth that much? Probably not, because there's still enough copies out there. But because of the popularity and because of the demand and because of the fact that people are willing to pay that 4-digit price, it is what it is. There's nothing you could do to argue against that. Using that same logic, I'm bringing it to the modern side. And as of right now, I don't believe there's enough sales data out there for Absolute Batman. My problem is the sellers. If sellers are forcing the issue with 400 and getting people to pay 400, guess what? They're saying a market at 400, which is not a good thing in the long run. I see you pricing people out at that point. But the graded comic book market is a if I could say a slippery slope in itself as opposed to raw books here. Now, am I a raw book or a graded book fan? I could take either or. And I've said this many times. I only grade books for preservational purposes. Meaning that I'm not saying I'm trying to preserve it by getting it graded. It's like, no, I'm preserving the actual state of that book at that given point in time. Meaning that, like, my copy of My Greatest Adventures number 80, which I thought was a 1.5, it came back at 3.5. I want to keep it as a 3.5. I wanted to get it graded right then and there. I know it's a 3.5 because it got certified. Now, I'm keeping it out of the sun and all the other stuff that you're supposed to do for that particular purpose. But when it was in a regular comic book bag and board, I was happy with it that way. I'm happy with it being encased here. Am I saying that the encapsulation is better? No. What I'm ensuring at this point is that it was once a 3.5. It was graded and certified that it was a 3.5. That's it. I'm preserving it as that. Just like how I preserve like copies of She-Hulk number 1 at a 9.8. I'm not saying that I couldn't keep it in a My Light in a My Light bag and a board and still have that 9.8. I just want to make certain I have one that is preserved at a 9.8. No more, no less. Now, other people will go overboard with encapsulating, and that's their prerogative. Just like you got people that will go overboard about keeping all the books raw. Now, if you're reading your books that often, so be it. Me, myself, and I read them. I have one, I buy multiple copies from time to time, depending on the series. Some series I don't, and some other things I do here. Oh, there's Aaron. It's like I'm over my Emma friend's house. Okay. So you're coming in towards the tail end of the rant here, Aaron. I was talking about what Swaggle had posted out there on a video from like 3 days ago, talking about, and I'll go and show people again. Let me just make it easier for everybody. This is the video that I'm talking about here. It's like collectors get big mad over Absolute Batman sale. Why do vintage hate modern? And I think that is not a fair description of the actual problem at hand. And what I was covering is the fact that when it comes to modern books, there's not enough sales data out there for all these outlier sales that are happening. Because people who could afford it are going to pay whatever they're going to pay to get the book that they want. In this case, when it comes to Absolute Batman number 1, you got enough outlier sales of people who are willing to pay $400 or more to make the book seem like the fair market value is $400 as of right now. Is that book really valued at $400? No, because there's too many. There's still a whole bunch of books that's still being graded, and there's still a whole bunch of those books that are still raw that hasn't been graded as of yet. And there has not been enough sales data to cover the full spectrum of all the different printings of Absolute Batman number 1 as of yet. So when you take a look at that bigger picture, the video itself kind of is misleading. What I don't like about the video is that it's really polarizing itself on splintering the community more so, instead of looking at the problem like it is as it's being stated here. I do agree with Swaggle House saying that, you know, the older stuff and newer stuff are comparing apples to oranges when it comes to sales data. With that being said, then you have to really look at the bigger problem here. Did you read Absolute Batman? No, I have not read any issue of Absolute Batman as of yet. But then again, I'm not a Batman fan. But I'm not poo-pooing Batman, Absolute Batman at all. What I'm highlighting here is the sales data behind it. And if it is what it is, if there's only 200 different sales of a graded, Batman, Absolute Batman #1 at a 9.8, that's too small of a sample to really say that the value of the book as of right now is $400, because there's too many outliers. Knowing good and well that there's still thousands of books that are probably still sitting in all these all these graded companies' doorsteps here, plus hundreds of thousands that's still raw out there. We don't know how many true 9.8s there are as of yet to really say that a 9.8 graded copy is worth that. It is what it is. Yeah, I know that you're not a Batman fan. Not his biggest fan, but I like the deal of the Ultimate Monster Hunter, though. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It is what it is as far as the content. And I'm not talking about content. What I'm really talking about, what he brought up, was the aspect of how in the thread that he was looking at, that was specifically talking about the topic, they had a lot of people who collected, gold, silver, and bronze, saying that, the $400 price tag is not worth it. You should be using that money to buy something that's more vintage. I was like, no. You got fanatic fans of Batman that are just that way, and it's nothing that you're going to do to convince them, if they have the opportunity to buy that 9.8 at whatever price that they have, with whatever discretional income that they have to do it in. But fair market value should not be dictated by those outlier sales. And that's where I see the problem at. It's like, you letting these outlier sales, and when I say letting, sellers are letting these outlier sales dictate that book is $400, as opposed to looking at it as an outlier sale, or looking at it as a fanatic fan willing to go above and beyond the Call of Duty to pay whatever it is to make certain that they have a 9.8 here. It's like, you're right on the about the hype of inflated prices when the scarcity isn't an issue. Okay, it's like, much love to you here. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm going to catch the rewind. Okay, cool. Because you missed the other topic here about AI and the one group dealing on Facebook and that I talked about here, because they took a stance with no AI period, and I was like, no, you have to be more detailed as far as what you mean by no AI. I get it, I understand it, but the stance that you're going to take, you have to really spell it out. And I spelled it out quite deeply here. So that would be something to watch on the rerun here. Yeah, we'll check. Yeah, that's going to be worthwhile here. And like I said, I could spend a lot of time on that, but I have actually done stuff within AI to actually know the difference and understand what it really entails, and go from there. And why did the television start? Okay, hold on. I don't want to get a copyright strike. Hold on. All right. Sorry about that. I don't know. I had Netflix on in the background, and all of a sudden it started playing a preview. And I don't understand why it's playing a preview. I don't want no copyright copyright stuff on this one, because it heard something in the background. So that's the reason why I stepped away here. But nevertheless, back to what we're talking about with Swaggle Hoss here. Because of those outliers, that book should not be $400. I get it. If I was a comic book store owner, I would want the biggest bang, the most money for that book if I can get it. But I also have to be fair. Because with newer books, you also want to get newer people into them. Your already established fan is going to do whatever they're going to do to get whatever book that they're going to get, regardless here. However, I rather to have brand new people. I rather have, little Jake or little Johnny coming in with their $4 or $5 or $6, picking up that Absolute Batman #1 and enjoying it at a good price here, and eventually making their way into subscribing into Absolute Batman and keeping up with reading with Absolute Batman. But let's just say, little Johnny is out here on the YouTubes and everything, and he's wanting to get into slab books. As much as everybody talking about the whole 9.8 thing, little Johnny saves up his allowance here. He barely has, $80 to $100, and he goes like, I want to get that Absolute Batman. I was like, I really am a good Batman fan. And he goes to the store. There's a 9.8, a CGC 9.8 or a CBCS 9.8. And the store owner looks at him and his $100 like, that's not enough, son. It's $400. And he's like, but it just came out not too long ago. How is it $400? That's the problem that is facing with modern comics more so today than it was back in the day. Back in the day, 80s and 90s, you could expect a book from like, the 1970s being, $20, $30, $40, $50 because that there's been more than a decade, more than 2 or 3 decades in between where you're at now and back then, and popularity of it. It makes sense. It wasn't until the 90s with the advent of variant covers and the ratio on those variant covers coming into play that drove the modern market to where it is right now, where it started to exclude people out. And I still blame, comic book series like Gen 13 Volume 2 with the 13 Gen 13 #1 covers. And when we started getting into books that had 4 or 5 on, now we got the publishers like Dynamite that's doing 30, 40, 50, even 100 #1 covers for a title. It's a cash grab. It's a cash grab based upon art. Is it okay? Yeah. If you're an art collector, I get it. I'm not going to knock those people who are art collectors. If you're an art collector, go for it. But if you're not an art collector, let's say that you're a completionist, that just drove up your budget to beyond belief just because you're a completionist. You have to have every last variation. And that's not a cool thing. It's not a cool thing. And then let's say you're a completionist who are now just getting started in collecting comics. That's not a good entry point. You're entering in to the hobby at a high price point. And that's where the problem with a lot of the modern books lie at right now. It would be different if the prices of comics was still like back in the day where, I grew up in a time where it's like $1, $1.50, $2 was like, man, I kind of wish that they were back at 75 cents or 50 cents. We were saying that back in the day in like the 90s. We're in 2025. You have to think about it. It's like I went from where it was like 50 cents to now where it's like $4.99, $5.99, $6.99. I seen the price inflations going up and up and up and up and up. I've been there for all the price variants until we get into the 1 and 10s, 1 and 25s, 1 and 50s, 1 and 100s, 1 per store, store exclusives and all the other stuff here, and paying through the yin yang. I was one of those chumps that bought the gold onslaught #1. I was one of those chumps. So I know what I'm speaking of about paying that extra money. But with that being said, when I first got started, it wasn't that way. The entry point was still rather easy. I kind of wish that that entry point was still rather easy in this modern era of comics. Think about it, $6.99, could buy you a burger and a drink at most fast food places. Barely, but it can. $6.99 could buy you a lot of different stuff that if you are a kid or a teenager, it could be a lot better used elsewhere than a single comic book. Now, if I was more savvy as a teenager of today, I could take that $6.99 and say, put another $7, $8, $9, $10 on it and go and get me a volume of manga instead and read that. So it's a lot to go up against. It's a lot to go up against, that goes against newer people coming into the hobby of American comics. Just like I understand, when I was really doing anime shows and everything, I understood how a lot of the anime fans think. I get it. Considering the fact that the average 13, 14-year-old is spending mom and dad's money, they're not going to spend mom and dad's money on a $4 or $5 American comic. Even if they was interested in it, they're not going to spend their money on that. They will spend their money on some Pocky and maybe a DVD video that they could get for like $15. They get more bang for their buck there. Or they might talk to a manga dealer that's there. Instead of paying me the $3 or $4, they probably add $4 more there and they get a volume of Naruto. It works out that way. The entry point for newer people, we're still at a price point where it makes sense in anime and manga. For American comic art, it doesn't make sense. That $4.99, $5.99, $6.99 price point for sometimes for a book that is less than 16 pages, it's not a really good price point for somebody that's brand new. So now you're going based upon buying it for art. Guess what? What happens if your favorite artist is that 1 in 25, 1 in 50, and 1 in 100? You're going to be priced out of that because now you're going from a $4.99, $5.99, $6.99 price point to like a $25, $50, $100 price point. Average teenage kid is not going to spend that much unless they are just that much of a diehard fan. And like I said, diehard fan, not a beginning fan, because the beginning fan would be like, no, I'm not going to touch the $100 book. I might as well use my money elsewhere. That's the key thing here when always talking about the modern age of comics. Wherever age that we're at, you always have to look at the entry point for brand new people. Is that entry point being made where it's easy for them to get into? And the problem here is with modern comics, it is not. For comics in general, it still is, because you still got quarter bins, 50-cent bins, $1 bins, and $5 bins. But what's usually in quarter bins, 50-cent bins, dollar bins, and $5 bins? The older stuff. This is why it is apples and oranges. It is messed up that the entry point for comics nowadays is still more of the older stuff than the newer stuff. Why is the newer stuff so inflated? It's not really inflated because of really the demand of new people. It's inflated because of the demand of the long-time collector. That's something to also think about too. And then one of the reasons why I kind of had that problem with Swaggle Hoss's video, because if it was truly vintage collectors versus modern collectors, then it would have been more along the lines like, where is that divide where somebody who was truly a vintage collector started swinging more towards the modern side and was saying, no, this is where it needs to be at, because the people who are paying that $400 price point for that 9.8 is somebody that's already been established in the collecting community. That's not a brand new reader in that sense. Sometimes it is. I'm not saying that it's never that. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you get that gung-ho new collector that's been like, I'm ready for it. I'm ready to do whatever it takes to get in. And they will pay that amount of money here. But that's few and far between. Usually it's somebody that's already established. So when you think about it, you know, that's why I had a problem with the splintering, because now you're really reinforcing that splintering. It's like, why did it splinter? Why is those who've been collecting for quite some time moving more into the modern camp? Because of the simple fact that they wanted to buy the Absolute Batman, one for $400. That's their right to. It wouldn't be collectors, being at odds at one another if you explain the overall problem the way that I just did. Is it a good thing? It's a good thing that it's getting graded, but the price point to me is more along the lines, there's not enough sales data to substantiate that is a $400 book. There's too many outliers there. And even he said that he wouldn't spend $400 on a 9.8 Absolute Batman when there are raw copies that you can still buy for $4.99 and pick out a 9.8 or a 9.9 or a possible 10 to send to get graded for a lot cheaper. And if you do your own grading round, your grading, pressing, and everything round, you still come out cheaper in the long run, if fair market value holds for $400. Now, wishing for something to fail, that's a whole different story. That's the part that he was reporting on as far as what was going on in the thread. There was literally people wishing for the book to fail and to come back, crashing back down to earth. And I was like, I wouldn't want the book coming crashing back down to where it becomes like a dollar bin book. No. But what I would like for it to happen is that the fair market value on a 9.8 comes back down to something more reasonable. I believe a 9.8 Absolute Batman #1 first print should be in a range of $70 to maybe like $95 right now. That's the range that I would personally judge it to be at, because it's still a newer series. Now, when you get into like the more exclusive stuff that's like store exclusive and have whatever quote unquote manufacturer rarity on it, I get it. That's when you start getting into like the $200 range, anywhere between $150 to $200. But nowhere near 400. It's nowhere near 400. If you took a cover A out of 9.8, it should be somewhere between $70 and $95. That's where it should be. $400 is where the demand is as of right now because of the outlier sales. There's no other people to blame for those outlier sales than the uber and really mean uber fans of Batman. So be it. Let them have their way. But eventually there's going to be more sales of the 9.8, which is going to bring that number eventually back down. I'm not going to say I want the book to fail, because that's not the right thing to say. But I do know beyond a shadow of doubt, there's going to be more sales of a 9.8 where it's going to be below $400. The question here is, are we going to have more people who are going to be outliers and willing to pay the exorbitant price? Or is it going to come back down to reality where people who are more budget conscious are going to start buying, and they're going to start buying at the lower price point? Or even worse, there's going to be people who buy it raw more so and just get it graded and hold on to it, which means that after a while those outlier sales become old enough where it becomes kind of like a obsolete measure, because you don't know where the popularity really lies at that point. That could also happen too. But enough about that as a whole here. It seems like there's not too many people communicating out there here, so I can't, go out to the crowd to ask for questions that they may have or anything to that magnitude. So we might bring this to an end here, because I don't think there's not too much that I want to talk about here beyond that. I mean, I covered everything the best that I can. Like I said, I don't want to bore people with the AI stuff here, but the Swaggle thing, I just wish that he would have really talked about why there are so many outlier sales that's driving it up to $400. And I'm not saying that these outlier sales is the problem. I just think there's not enough sales data out there to really say that it's really a $400 book. It is a brand new title. You got Uber fans that's just going to flock to it and pay whatever they got to pay to get their 9.8 fix on. And everybody else is going to wait until a little bit later. Now, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, we probably get a better aspect of what that number one is going to be truly worth, because there's enough sales data there at that point. And by that time, it should be enough books that are graded for you could say, if it's between a 9.8 and a 9.4, you're probably going to pay X, Y, and Z. If it's between, a 9.4 and a 9.0, you're going to pay about this much. And if it's, an 8, if it's an 8.0 or below, it's going to be, you're going to be paying, really, 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 really cheap here. But usually 8 and above is that usually that cutoff point of where, you're going to see your money being made at here. So on that note, I'm bringing everything to a close here. I hope that everybody enjoyed tonight's episode here. I kind of wish that we had more of a chat on this here, because like I said, I keep this stuff up for open debate here. So if you're watching it on the replay, go ahead and leave a comment here. Shout outs to Swaggle for a video that is, like I said, it's great content. I just wish that he would have expanded more on the actual problem from the sales point of view. But the thing about it is, he only reported about what the thread that he saw. And the thread, and the way that I looked at that thread, is like, yeah, it's still splintering the collective community as a whole. We should stop trying to splinter our community. That needs to stop. We need to look at the problem as it is. And the problem here is Absolute Batman being at Absolute Batman 1 being at $400 is a temporary thing. It's temporary. Wishing it to come crashing down, don't do it. Only thing you can say is like there's not enough sales data as of yet, because you got the Uber fans buying the stuff right now. Let's give it some time and let the market dictate it to where it's at. That's pretty much what we can do here. As far as the AI is concerned, you have to put it out there. Define what you meant by no AI. If you say don't use this tool, this tool, this tool, this tool, this tool, or this tool, good. That's descriptive enough where people know don't mess with anything that is, those type of tools here. If it's don't use non-public domain works, that needs to be specified, because it's not fair for those people who actually do have AI tools that's using their own resources, meaning all the artwork that they actually physically generated themselves. that's unfair to them. You have to be very specific. So, as always, live life, grow, and be well. I will see you guys here next Saturday for another episode from the Desktop Small Press Publisher. This has been Joe D. McPhee, and we are out of here. Thank you, and have a good rest of your Saturday.